My name is Sophia Carter. I'm 34. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday when my mother called me. Not to ask how I was holding up, not to say she was on her way, not even to ask if I needed anything. She called me to tell me she wasn't coming. My husband had been dead for 11 hours. His body was still at Hartford Regional, still warm in the way that hospital rooms hold heat long after a person is gone, and my mother's voice on the other end of that line was not the voice of a grieving woman. It was the voice of someone calculating how inconvenient this was for her. Sophia. That was how she opened it. Not honey, not sweetheart, just my name, clipped and flat, like she was reading it off a form. I need you to understand that we had Emily's birthday planned for months. The deposits are non-refundable. The venue… Mom. My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. Michael is dead. 3 seconds of silence. Then, I know that, and I am heartbroken for you. But you know how Emily gets when plans change. I sat down on the linoleum floor of the hospital corridor. I remember the cold of it through my scrubs. I remember the fluorescent light above me buzzing at a frequency I had never noticed before. I remember staring at a scuff mark on the baseboard that was shaped like nothing in particular. Emily's birthday, I said. We'll come right after. The party ends at 11, we can… I hung up. Before I go any further, I want to say something. If stories about people who stand up for themselves after being left behind mean anything to you, if you've ever sat on a cold floor in a hospital hallway and wondered why the people who were supposed to love you simply weren't there, please hit like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time it is there. I want to know I'm not talking into empty air, because this story is about what happens after that phone call. Not just that night, but the 6 months that followed and what my husband had quietly been building for me long before he ever got sick. Let me take you back 9 years, to the summer I met Michael Carter. I was 25, pulling double shifts at Hartford Regional because nursing school debt doesn't wait for you to catch your breath. I smelled like antiseptic and vending machine coffee on a permanent basis. My apartment on Claremont Avenue had a radiator that knocked every 20 minutes, like someone politely reminding me life was hard. Michael came in on a Tuesday night with a broken hand. Punched a wall, he admitted, laughing about it already. He'd been trying to hang a bookshelf, and the anchor pulled through the drywall, and he'd swung in pure frustration. I splinted 2 of his fingers and told him he was an idiot. He brought me flowers the next day. Not to the hospital. He didn't know where I lived. He'd called the hospital, asked for the ER nurse named Sophia who'd called him an idiot, and left a bouquet of sunflowers at the front desk with a note that read, "You were right. I'm an idiot. Are you free Saturday?" We were married 14 months later. My parents came to the wedding. They sat in the front row and smiled for photos, and my mother told everyone within earshot how proud she was of me. That was the last time she would ever use that word. Michael always said the same thing when I'd come home exhausted and hollow after a brutal shift. Kids with head trauma, a husband who hadn't made it, a teenager who'd coded twice on the table. He'd hand me a cup of chamomile tea and sit next to me on the couch without saying anything for a while. Then he'd say, "You found the ones who needed you. That's all you can do. You found them." I didn't know yet what he meant. Not really. Not until much later. He was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy 14 months before he died. We caught it during a routine physical. His heart muscle was weakening quietly, in the way that the most dangerous things tend to, without drama, without warning, without giving you enough time to prepare. We had 14 months. Some of them were good. He kept working his job at Meridian Architecture Group until he couldn't anymore. We took a trip to Savannah because he'd always wanted to see the Spanish moss on the live oak trees. I have a photograph of him standing under one of those trees, squinting into the afternoon light, grinning like someone who had just remembered a joke he'd been meaning to tell. He died on a Wednesday. 10:24 a.m. I was not in the room when it happened because I had stepped out to get him more ice chips, and by the time I came back, the machine was making a sound I had heard 1,000 times at work, and never, until that moment, understood as personal. My mother called at 9:47 p.m. to tell me she wouldn't be coming to the funeral. She said what? Angela Reyes had been my closest colleague at Hartford Regional for 6 years, 7 by that point. She had a way of listening with her entire body, leaning forward, hands folded. When I told her what my mother had said, she sat completely still for 4 full seconds. Emily's birthday party, I confirmed. Angela pressed her lips together. She chose her words the way you do when the right ones are, "How dare she?" And you know that won't help. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. I'm coming. I'll be there Saturday. And so will Marcus. And I'm going to bring food, and you don't get to say no." The funeral was that Saturday. Angela came. Dr. Priya Patel came, who had worked alongside me in the trauma bay for 4 years, and who cried harder than I did, which I still think about. Marcus Webb, who was our charge nurse and one of the most quietly decent people I have ever known, sat in the second row and stared at his hands through most of the service. 4 chairs in the front row, reserved with white ribbon, labeled with my parents' names and Emily's name and the space where a family was supposed to sit, remained empty the entire service. Pastor Grace noticed. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. I could tell by the way she looked at those chairs when she thought no one was watching. My mother called the next morning. "How was it? Was it beautiful? I thought about you all day." I had no response to that, none that I trusted myself to give. "We'll come visit soon," she said. "We're your family, Sophia. We're here for you." I wrote those words down in my journal that night, not out of spite, just because I had the feeling, somewhere very specific in my sternum, that I would need them later. The insurance company confirmed the payout 6 weeks after Michael's death, $5 million. Michael had taken out the policy 8 years before his diagnosis. He'd never mentioned it, not directly. He'd mentioned planning, the way he always mentioned it, quiet and practical, the way he mentioned the bookshelf or the gutters or the furnace filter. He planned things. It was his nature. I did not immediately tell my family. I don't know why I didn't. Something in me, some low hum of instinct that the ER teaches you, the ability to triage a situation before anyone else has registered there's a problem, kept that information locked behind my teeth. 3 weeks later, my mother called. "Sophia, I've been thinking." Her voice had shifted into the register she used when she wanted something. I had learned this register when I was 8 years old, and she'd wanted me to give up my bedroom for a visiting aunt. It was warm. It was reasonable. It was the vocal equivalent of a hand extended that might, at any moment, pull you off balance. "Your father and we've been talking, and we feel terrible about how things have been. We want to be there for you now. We really do." I said, "Okay." We were thinking, maybe dinner, Sunday. Emily wants to come too. My sister, Emily, who was 29, who had never held a job longer than 8 months, who had called me mom's second choice at Christmas when she was 17 and laughed like it was a joke. Emily, who had spent most of our childhood as the soft center of the family, the one who got the Harvard fund while I got the community college application in a handshake. Emily, whose birthday party had been worth more to my parents than my husband's funeral. "Sure," I said. "Sunday." I went to that dinner. I watched my mother reach across the table and squeeze my hand. I watched my father order the salmon and nod slowly at everything I said, the nod of a man performing attentiveness. I watched Emily talk about herself for 45 minutes, and then, when there was a pause, look at me and say, "So, are you doing okay, like, financially?" Something shifted in my chest, not anger, something colder. "I'm managing," I said. My mother caught Emily's eye across the table. I saw it. They didn't know I saw it. The calls started weekly after that, then twice a week. My mother's script cycled through several variations, but the core was always the same. "We've been trying to be there for you. We've tried so hard, Sophia. We're your family. We're heartbroken that you're keeping us at a distance. All we want is to be close to you again. Is that too much to ask?" The first time she said it, I sat with the phone pressed to my ear and counted the ceiling tiles in my bedroom. The second time, I felt something I can only describe as a seam beginning to come apart. Not in me, but in the performance they were putting on. Like I was watching a stage set and I could see, for the first time, the paint peeling at the edges. The third time my mother called, she said, "Sophia, we've been doing a lot of soul searching, and we feel like, as your family, we have a responsibility to be part of your healing. Your father and I, we think it would be good for everyone if we helped you manage the estate. You're overwhelmed. Anyone would be. You shouldn't have to carry this alone." There it was, not even a full breath after healing. Manage the estate. "I'll think about it," I said. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table for a very long time. I had gone back to work 3 weeks after Michael's death. Not because I had to. The insurance payout was confirmed, and $5 million, carefully managed, is not a crisis. I went back because the ER was the one place where my grief was required to be small, where there were people who needed me to focus, where I could, for 12 hours at a stretch, be useful in a way that had nothing to do with my family, or my loss, or the 4 empty chairs at my husband's funeral. Angela noticed I was different. Not broken. She'd have said something if I seemed broken. Just quieter. Operating on a frequency that had shifted slightly. "You're not sleeping," she said one morning, after a shift where we'd worked a multi-car accident for 6 straight hours. "I'm sleeping." "How many hours?" "Some of them." She handed me a coffee. "The foundation idea. Have you thought more about it?" Michael and I had talked about it. A foundation in Hartford, specifically for families in medical crisis who didn't have the support systems to navigate it, who didn't have someone who knew how hospitals worked, who could sit with the paperwork, who could translate the language of the ICU for a spouse who'd never had reason to learn it. Michael had believed in it completely. He said, "You know what it's like to be on both sides of that curtain, Sophia. You're the only person I know who does." "I've thought about it," I said. "And?" I think Michael was right. Angela smiled into her coffee. He usually was. I was in the break room 2 months after Michael's death, 8:22 a.m., between a shift and a department meeting, when my mother walked into Hartford Regional. She didn't come to the ER desk. She went directly to the break room, which means she'd asked someone for directions. She walked in wearing a cream-colored blouse and a look of focused concern, and behind her came my father in his gray jacket, and behind him, Emily. All 3 of them. In my hospital, in my break room, at 8:22 in the morning. I had a cup of coffee halfway to my mouth. My mother looked at me and then looked around the room. 3 nurses from the night shift were at the table. Dr. Patel was by the coffee machine. Marcus was in the corner eating a granola bar. My mother's voice filled the room like she'd been waiting to perform this. "Sophia, I'm sorry to come here. I know this is your workplace, but we've tried calling and you don't answer, and we're worried about you. We're genuinely worried." She pressed a hand to her chest. "We're your family. We love you. We just want to know you're okay." I set my coffee down carefully. "I'm okay," I said. "You don't seem okay." Her voice pitched upward slightly, not quite a tremble, but adjacent to one. "You're closed off. You're shutting us out. And after everything we've been through together—" "What have we been through together?" I asked. The break room was completely silent. My mother blinked. "We're your family." "You didn't come to Michael's funeral, Mom." "That was—" She stopped. Reset. "That was a very painful decision. We struggled with it enormously. But the fact that you've been punishing us ever since—" "I'm not punishing you. You're not returning calls. I'm working." I looked at her steadily. "I'm at work right now." My father took a step forward. His voice was the low, final voice he used when he'd decided something. "Sophia, your mother is trying to extend an olive branch. The least you can do is—" "Robert," Marcus's voice came from the corner, quiet and flat. My father stopped. My mother looked around the room, and her expression shifted, just slightly, from wounded to calculating. She was reading the room. She was deciding which version of this she could salvage. "We'll call you tonight," she said. "I hope you'll answer." They left. I stood in that break room for 3 full minutes before anyone spoke. Then Dr. Patel said very quietly, "Do they do that often?" "No," I said. But something had cracked open in me. Not grief, not anger. Something that felt like clarity after a very long blur. That was the moment I stopped waiting to see what they would do. That was the moment I decided to find out what Michael had done. I found the envelope 3 weeks later. I had been going through Michael's home office, a real going through, not the grief-adjacent shuffle I'd done in the weeks immediately after, where I'd moved things without seeing them. This was different. I was looking. For what? I didn't fully know yet. The office smelled like him still. Wood polish and old paper, and the particular dry warmth of a room where a man had spent a lot of quiet hours thinking. It was in the third drawer of his filing cabinet, beneath a folder labeled Meridian Archives, Closed Projects. The envelope was sealed and addressed to me in his handwriting. Not printed, handwritten, in the particular architectural print he'd used since school. Deliberate and even, for Sophia. Open when you need to. My hands were steady when I picked it up. I don't know why I expected them to shake. I carried it to the kitchen table, sat down, looked at it for a while. Then I made a cup of chamomile tea, the same kind he used to make me, and I opened it. Inside was a letter, 7 pages of handwriting, and a sealed inner envelope marked, "For Attorney Eleanor Hayes. Please contact before opening." There was a business card clipped to it. Eleanor D. Hayes, Estate Attorney, 412 Bridgewater Avenue, Suite 7. I read the letter. "Dear Sophia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and your mother is already doing what I knew she would do. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it while I was here. I watched the way she calculated things, the wedding, the holidays, the Sunday calls that always seemed to circle around to money, and I knew that the moment you had something real, something significant, she would find a way to position herself at the center of it. I couldn't stop her from trying. I could only make sure it wouldn't work. Do you remember our first apartment on Claremont Avenue? The radiator that knocked every 20 minutes? You told me once, half asleep, that the knocking sounded like someone checking to make sure you were still there. I thought about that a lot over the years. I wanted to be the person who kept checking. I hope I did. The original life insurance documents, the trust, and all associated legal instruments are held by Eleanor D. Hayes at 412 Bridgewater Avenue, Suite 7. She has been holding them for 4 years. She knows everything. She is expecting you. I told her it might be 6 months, it might be 2 years, but that you would come eventually. Inside this envelope, certified copy of the $5 million life insurance beneficiary designation, sole beneficiary, Sophia Carter, irrevocable, signed and witnessed. A trust document establishing the Carter Family Foundation with $1, $2 million initial funding, with you as sole trustee. Bank records showing 8 years of documented premium payments from my personal account. A notarized statement from Pastor Grace Holloway of Riverside Community Church, written at my request 2 years ago, documenting her observations of your family's conduct and your character over the course of our marriage. My own written account of 4 specific conversations with your mother in which she discussed directly her expectation of inheriting from our estate. You are not a burden, Sophia. You are not difficult. You are not the reason your family is broken. You found people who needed you your entire life. You found them before they knew they needed finding. That is not a flaw. You found me. All my love, Michael. The idiot with the bookshelf. I read it twice, then a third time. I sat at that kitchen table for 22 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock when I sat down and looked at it again when I finally got up. Then I called 412 Bridgewater Avenue, Suite 7, and asked for Eleanor Hayes. Eleanor Hayes was 61 years old, small, with reading glasses that she pushed to the top of her head when she was thinking and pulled down when she was about to say something important. She met me in her office on a Tuesday afternoon with a folder on her desk and the particular calm of someone who has been waiting for a specific meeting for a long time. "He came to me 4 years ago," she said, "after your mother's third attempt to be named on the insurance policy." She said it without commentary, just fact. He wanted to make sure everything was airtight. In his words, "I want her to have the truth before she has to fight for anything." She pushed the folder toward me. I opened it. The beneficiary designation was clean and documented across 3 witness signatures. The trust documents for the Carter Family Foundation were complete, waiting only for my activation signature. And in the back of the folder, clipped together in a separate section, were 4 printed transcripts of recorded phone conversations. My mother's voice. My mother's voice speaking to Michael, in the year before his diagnosis, discussing, specifically, numerically, what she expected to happen to Sophia's assets when something eventually happened, discussing the $5 million policy by name, discussing me by name in the third person, as if I were already a piece of property changing hands. Something that had been locked inside me for a long time came loose very quietly. Not rage, something cleaner than rage. "What do I do with these?" I asked. Eleanor Hayes folded her hands on the desk. "Whatever you decide," she said. "Michael didn't leave you a script. He left you a choice. These documents protect you whether you use them publicly or privately." She paused. "But I suspect you'll know when the moment is right." I suspected the same. The call came on a Friday afternoon, 5.5 months after Michael's death. It was my mother's voice, and there was something different in it this time. Not the calculated warmth, not the performed concern. This was lighter, more confident. She had something. "Sophia, I've spoken to Pastor Grace. She's hosting a women's fellowship gathering at Riverside Community Church next Sunday, a prayer meeting, very small and intimate, 20 or so women from the neighborhood. She thought it would be a lovely environment for us to come together, for healing. She's been concerned about you, and she thought—" "A prayer meeting," I said. "Yes, coffee and cookies, just women from the community, a safe space to talk." Her voice softened. "I'd really like us to have a chance to speak, to tell our side of things and hear yours. Properly. Pastor Grace will be there to facilitate." I thought about Pastor Grace's face at the funeral, looking at the 4 empty chairs. "I'll be there," I said. "Das." Sunday morning, I dressed carefully. Not dramatically. I did not want to look like someone who had come to win something. I wore the blue dress Michael had always liked. I put the inner envelope, the one marked for attorney Eleanor Hayes, in my bag, along with a folder of copied documents that Eleanor had prepared for exactly this kind of moment. I drove to Riverside Community Church on Morrison Street and sat in the parking lot for 4 minutes. Then I went inside. The fellowship room at Riverside Community Church was set up the way my mother liked things set up, carefully, signaling effort. Round tables with white tablecloths, a coffee station along the back wall, a tray of cookies arranged by color. 22 women, I counted them, from the neighborhood and the women's fellowship, seated or standing with cups in hand, the low hum of Sunday morning conversation filling the room. My mother was at the front near the small podium Pastor Grace used for readings. She was wearing a burgundy dress and had her hair done. Emily was beside her in a yellow blazer, scanning the room with the slightly anxious look of someone who has been rehearsed. My father sat in a chair to the left. He was the only man in the room and seemed mildly aware of it. Pastor Grace stood near the window. When she saw me, she nodded once, not in greeting exactly, more like confirmation. I took a seat near the back. A woman named Dorothy, who I recognized from the church's food pantry committee, patted my hand as I sat down. "So glad you came, honey." My mother spotted me across the room. Her expression, And this is the part I have turned over many times, shifted through 3 separate things in about 2 seconds: relief, satisfaction, and then something I can only describe as readiness. She had planned a speech. Pastor Grace opened with a prayer, short, sincere, asking for clarity and compassion in difficult conversations. Then she gestured to my mother. My mother stood. I want to start by saying how grateful I am that Sophia is here. She looked directly at me. Her voice was steady and warm, the voice she used at church events, the voice of a woman who had practiced this. Our family has been through an incredibly painful year. We've lost a son-in-law we cared deeply about, and in the grief of that loss, things have been said and not said, and distance has grown between us. She paused exactly where she'd planned to pause. We've tried to be there for her. We have tried, and we've reached out, and we've been met with silence. We're heartbroken. We're not here to argue. We're here because we love our daughter, and we want her back. Several women nodded. Dorothy, beside me, made a small sound of sympathy. Emily wiped at the corner of her eye. My father sat with his hands folded and his expression arranged into something between grief and dignity. My mother continued, I know there are people in this room who have seen us at our worst. I know. We're not perfect parents. We've made mistakes. But the idea that we would abandon our daughter in her time of grief, that we don't care about her, her voice cracked on cue, that breaks my heart. We've tried to be there for her. She's the one who's pushed us away. And there it was. The phrase. The one I'd written down in my journal the morning after Michael's funeral. We've tried to be there for her. The room was quiet, sympathetic, 22 women absorbing a performance. I stood up, not dramatically. I didn't knock my chair back. I just stood up from the table near the back and said, May I respond? My mother's eyes narrowed, not visibly enough for the room, but visibly enough for me. She smiled. Of course, sweetheart. I walked to the front. I set my bag on the table beside the podium. I opened the folder. I want to talk about that night, I said. The night Michael died, October 14th. He was pronounced at 10:24 a.m. I looked at the room. My mother is right that she reached out to me. She called at 9:47 p.m. that evening. I have the call log here if anyone wants to see it. The call lasted 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I slid the printed log onto the table where the nearest women could see it. During that call, she told me she would not be attending the funeral because of a non-refundable venue deposit for Emily's birthday party. Emily's face had gone very still. She's right that I stopped returning calls after the funeral. I want to explain why. I opened the second section of the folder. Because 3 weeks after Michael died, my mother called to suggest she help me manage the estate. And because I have, in this folder, transcripts of 4 recorded phone conversations between my mother and my late husband. Conversations Michael made with the knowledge and assistance of his attorney, Eleanor Hayes, at 412 Bridgewater Avenue, in which my mother discusses this insurance policy by name and discusses her expectation of access to it. The sound in the room changed. The low hum stopped entirely. I placed the transcripts on the table. My mother said she's tried to be there for me. I kept my voice even. It wasn't difficult. I had been preparing for this in one way or another since October 14th, and the truth has a stillness to it that I hadn't expected. A stillness that makes the performance around it suddenly very visible. On the day of Michael's funeral, there were 4 chairs reserved at the front of the church with white ribbon, for my parents and Emily. I looked at Pastor Grace. Pastor Grace, do you remember those chairs? Pastor Grace, standing near the window, said quietly but clearly, They were empty through the entire service. They were empty through the entire service, I repeated, not triumphant, just said. I am not here to tell you my mother doesn't love me. I genuinely don't know what's in her heart. But I know what was on her calendar on the day of my husband's funeral, and I know what she's been asking for since she found out about this policy. I closed the folder. Michael prepared these documents 4 years ago. He knew. He made sure I would have the truth. I picked up my bag. That's all I have to say? I walked toward the door. My mother's voice came from behind me, and here is where the performance cracked. Finally, completely, like a dam that had been holding pressure for longer than it was designed to. Do you know how much I gave up for you? Her voice had lost the warmth. What was underneath it was something rawer and less rehearsed, and I think more honest than anything she'd said in the previous 15 minutes. Do you have any idea what it cost me to? The sacrifices I made? And you stand there with your $5 million and your little documents? She stopped. The room absorbed this. 22 women. Dorothy, beside my empty chair, had both hands pressed flat on the table. A woman named Helen from the food pantry had sat back in her chair as if she needed distance. Pastor Grace had her eyes closed. Emily said, barely audibly, "Mom." My mother realized what she'd said. She looked around the room, the calculation happening fast, too fast, visibly, and tried to reset. "That's not what I didn't mean." "It's all right," I said from the doorway. "I wasn't being cruel. I meant it. You don't have to explain." I left. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Riverside Community Church for 7 minutes. The autumn afternoon was very quiet. A single crow on the fence post near the entrance road. A maple tree against the sky in the particular yellow of mid-October. The kind of yellow that is really more gold. The kind that only happens right at the end. I thought about the radiator on Claremont Avenue. The knock every 20 minutes. Someone checking to make sure you're still there. I thought, I'm still here. Then I started the car and drove home. I found out later from Dorothy, who called me the following Tuesday, what happened after I left. Dorothy said my mother had tried to continue, had tried to frame what she'd said about the $5 million as a misstatement, a lapse of emotion. That Helen had said, directly and without much softness, "Karen, we heard what you said." That several women had left without finishing their coffee. That Emily had said nothing for the rest of the gathering. That my father had stared at his hands. That Pastor Grace had said, to the room at large before they dispersed, "I think we have all learned something today about the difference between showing up and claiming to show up." Eleanor Hayes filed the relevant documents with the insurance company the following week. The $5 million payout had already cleared to my accounts, my name, solely, irrevocably. The transcripts were provided to the insurance company's fraud review department as a precautionary record. No charges were ultimately filed. My mother had never succeeded in accessing the money, only in trying to. The record stands regardless. I activated the Carter Family Foundation 2 weeks after the church meeting. Hartford Regional Hospital announced a partnership with the foundation in January. A patient navigation program specifically for families in medical crisis, staffed by social workers and volunteer nurses who know how to sit with people in the language of the ICU and translate it into something survivable. Angela Reyes is the program's first director. Marcus Webb is on the advisory board. I named the program the Michael Carter Navigation Initiative, and I had a small plaque made for the wall of the intake room. It does not have a quote or a motto. It has his name, his dates, and the words, "He found the ones who needed finding." It has been 8 months since the fellowship room at Riverside Community Church. I moved to a smaller apartment on the east side of Hartford, not because I had to, but because the house on Claremont Lane was his and mine, and I needed a space that was only mine for a while. The new apartment has good light in the mornings and a small balcony where I've started growing herbs in clay pots: basil, thyme, rosemary. Something Michael would have found inexplicably funny, given that I have never once in my adult life cooked an elaborate meal. I still work night shifts. Not because I need to. I could step back, I have the means. But because 2 a.m. in an ER is a specific kind of truth and I am not ready to leave it yet. Maybe someday. My mother has not called in 6 months. My father sent a card at Christmas, a pre-printed card, nothing handwritten inside. I kept it on my counter for a week and then recycled it, not out of anger. There is a difference between recycling something and throwing it away, and I have been trying to learn the difference in a lot of areas. Emily called once, said she was sorry. She used the word sorry once, quickly, and then immediately moved on to explaining her perspective, which is the way people use the word sorry when they mean, I said it, now we're even. I thanked her for calling. I didn't call back. I went to Michael's grave on the anniversary of his death. I brought sunflowers, the same kind he'd left at the front desk of Hartford Regional 9 years ago. I sat on the bench the cemetery keeps near the larger headstones, and I talked to him for a while. The way I'd talk to him when I came home from brutal shifts and we'd sit on the couch and let the silence do most of the work. I told him about the foundation, about Angela, about the basil on the balcony that is doing unreasonably well for someone who has no idea what she's doing. I told him the radiator in the new apartment doesn't knock. I told him I missed it. If you're watching this, I want to say one specific thing. Not a lesson exactly. More like something I've turned over enough times that it has started to feel solid. Presence is not the same as proximity. There are people who will stand very close to you your entire life, who will be in the front row of your wedding, and call on your birthday, and show up at your hospital to perform their worry in front of your colleagues. And there are people who will be thousands of miles away, or working a night shift, or quietly setting things in motion in an attorney's office 4 years before you need them. And those second people are the ones who are actually there. My mother was in every room. Michael was in every room that mattered. The 4 empty chairs at the funeral told me everything I needed to know. I just needed the rest of the story to understand what they meant. So, I'm driving home from an overnight shift right now. The sun is just coming up over the highway. That particular thin gold of early morning in November, the kind that comes in at a low angle and makes everything look like the first day of something. I have basil on my balcony, and a job I believe in, and a foundation with my husband's name on it. I have the memory of a man who sat on a cold floor with me once, who stood under a live oak tree in Savannah, and squinted into the afternoon light like he was keeping a promise, who left me, not grief, not just grief, but instructions, evidence, a sealed envelope that said, open when you need to. I needed to. I'm glad he knew I would. If you've ever been in a room full of people who were supposed to love you and realized very quietly that you were alone in it, type I saw the empty chairs in the comments. If you've ever had someone prepare for you before you knew you needed preparing for, type he already knew. Both are real. Both are worth saying out loud. If this story meant something to you, check the description for more stories like this one. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves out there.